Welcome to a journey through NYC Religions Television. We often casually say that New York is the center of the world. Sometimes it's true. Today, we will introduce you to Reverend Mitch Glaser, who is putting on a conference that claims that what happened here in 9/11 has created a new Middle East. What is extraordinary about Mitch Glaser is that he was born a New York Jew who fled his Jewish upbringing to take a wild ride in the late 1960s, early 70s, only to end up to join the Jesus movement of the 1970s. He has become one of the most influential figures in the evangelical world and has set himself a new mission. He's using his knowledge of Jews, Christians, Muslims, New York City, and the Middle East to explain what he thinks is happening in the 21st century as a result of 9/11. Welcome to the program, Mitch.
Shalom, Tony. Wonderful to be with you.
You're a very busy person, always thinking and writing, and you just showed me another book that I suspect you had something to do with. Is there any signs of you slowing down?
There's a deep desire to slow down, Tony, because if I slow down, then I could do some more. So it's never slow. It's a slow down to do more. So, you know.
Well, we've the subject matter this morning is one of those events that sort of slows down and speeds up all at once. And that was 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. I'm wondering, where were you when the plane struck the towers?
Yeah, I was exactly where I am now. I was in my office in Manhattan on East 51st Street between 2nd and 3rd, the Chosen People International Headquarters. Probably, you know, if you're in New York, you know how to evaluate geography by the number of blocks, but maybe a quarter of a mile, maybe 5-10 blocks from the UN. And I was right here and having it was actually a beautiful day, beautiful morning. And our staff was getting ready to have chapel at 9 a.m. And then a little bit before 9 a.m., something dramatic happened that not only changed our day, changed our year, and in many ways changed our lives.
How did you hear of it first?
I was just reflecting.
Walk in and say, "Oh, there's something funny going on," or something?
No, actually, I was just reflecting with this on this. Our receptionist, who's also a Jewish believer in Jesus, has been here for almost as long as me, 25 years, and all I heard was her really screaming and saying, "Oh my God! Oh my God! A plane went into the Twin Towers." And, you know, we thought it was a little propeller plane. You know, we had images of King Kong, you know, and the Empire State Building, and we were so innocent at that time. And really 9/11 took away our innocence. And so I ran down the stairs, and she had already turned on the TV, and there was this plane stuck in the tower. And so it didn't take long for our whole staff to gather in our little reception room with the TV, and there was probably 25 people in there. And we were all standing together when a few moments later, the second plane struck the second tower.
And you knew it was a second plane, not just a repeat of the video.
Oh yeah, that was clear. And the reason it was clear is because everybody was so surprised by it. They had cameras were already focused on the area, and boom, there it was. And at that point, we didn't know what happened with the first plane. It could have been a mistake. Nobody thought terrorism, at least not us. But when that second plane hit, Tony, we knew that we were experiencing some kind of attack on the U.S. We had no idea what it was. But can you imagine 2 airline jet captains smashing into the Twin Towers because they got their directions confused. I don't think so. So we knew something that happened, and immediately people began to hold hands. A bunch of us began to tear up and cry, and we realized very quickly, because the second plane came in a little bit lower, on the second tower, and you knew that everybody above, you didn't think about people below, but everybody in that space and above, you knew was gone, and so fear struck our hearts, and the terrorists did a pretty good job. We were terrorized.
What did you do then?
Well, we prayed and watched the news for a little while, and then we sent out two of our staff members, both missionaries, but one a nurse and the other one an anesthesiologist, actually, doctor. And we sent them out, but no trains were running, cabs weren't running, and you couldn't really get down there easily. So they walked from 51st Street down to the World Trade Center. And that took a long time, and they couldn't report back because cell phones weren't working. And an odd call got through somehow once in a while. But they didn't come back for a few hours. And when they came back, we asked how it was going. They said, well, it wasn't easy to get in there, but with all the confusion, they weren't able to keep people out who were there quickly. And they stopped by NYU Hospital on the way back on First Avenue and 34th Street. And there were very few people in there with serious injuries at that point. And when they came back to the office in the later part of the afternoon, probably about 3 o'clock they got back, they said, there are no survivors from the people that were in there. That was their understanding of it. And immediately we understood that our ministry, because that's the way we are wired, that's how we think. So our new role was to try and serve the first responders and people who obviously lost loved ones. And all sorts of other things happened, but obviously we don't have the time to talk about it.
Did you lose any friends or acquaintances in the towers?
I had not close friends, but people I know, and another Messianic Jewish leader's brother-in-law was in there and he died. And what was interesting for me was I had just spoken at a church in New Jersey a week or two before, and I spent an hour with a guy who was really interested on how to share the gospel with his Jewish friends and had a lot of Jewish friends, and was in the media on the technical side and ran a lot of the technical stuff up on the top of the Twin Towers. And he said, I work with a lot of Jewish people, and we had a great conversation. I gave him some books, and then 9/11 happened really 2 weeks later. And the next thing I know, I turned on TV, and for some reason they were showing his funeral. And it really hit me like a ton of bricks.
How did 9/11 start to change your life? Or did it right away?
It changed everything right away. First of all, I lived in Brooklyn, still live in Brooklyn. And I don't have to explain to everybody. I mean, when you remember things in your past, you remember songs that generate memory, and of course you also remember smells that generate memory. And there was a horrible smell in the air. It was really the smell of death. And so doom and gloom fell over us. Our administration continued to do what they needed to do, although every day was a new problem. My kids couldn't get to school because of anthrax scares, and the subways were not working. So it took a week before you could even really get around easily. And so the one thing I did do, Tony, is I realized it was a terrorist attack. I realized that the terrorists were trying to get us to be fearful and to stop our lives. And so I opened the office the next day, and I was able to drive in miraculously. Subways were not, they were running, but not that well. And I told everybody they didn't have to come in. But a few of us came in, and we didn't get much work done that day, but we felt that was our way of telling the terrorists that they didn't win.
This, maybe we didn't realize at the time, this was not an isolated incident. Right off of Jaffa in Jerusalem, right off Jaffa Avenue is a bookstore called Sefer Ve'Savel. Have you ever been to that? It's a biggest English bookstore in the Middle East, it claims. Are you familiar with that bookstore?
I believe, isn't it run by CMJ, the Church's Ministry Among the Jews? I think so. It's right. Is it in the old city at Christ at the
I
Jaffa
can't tell
Gate?
you. The building is an old stone building. I don't know.
At the Jaffa Gate.
Near. It's just off of. It's 1 block from King George Avenue and just off of Jaffa. One of those little streets that go off.
Then I'm not sure. There's another one at the Jaffa Gate, which is
That's right. I think this is a different one.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is that if you go out of that bookstore and you turn left, you hit Jaffa Avenue. You turn left, you get to King George. I think it's like King George the 5th Avenue or something like that.
Yep. Street.
There was a Saboros there.
That blew.
Saboros. Did you ever hear about the Saboro bombing in Jerusalem?
Oh yeah, of course.
Well, that happened August 9th. August 9th. And 130, 40 people were injured, 15 injured, 1 pregnant lady, 7 children. And to sort of bookend it, there were 2 Saboros in the World Trade Center that were destroyed. And actually 46 others closed because of the airline traffic went down. So that incident on August 9th, I didn't put the 2 together, but in some ways, those things were that was a smaller deal, of course, but it led just by about a month of what happened in the World Trade Center. And this was the center. This was part of what was called the Second Intifada.
Correct.
This massive, the Palestinians call it resistance, but it was a massive terrorist, a whole set of terrorist attacks that started in 2000 and went on for a couple of years. And this bombing was part of it. And in my mind, those are just sort of 2 different things. And of course, the terrorists were different groups, but it was just sort of 2 different things. But in fact, there was some sort of connection that and even to the extent that the same restaurants were bombed.
I never put the same restaurants. The discotheque was bombed. Also, one of my favorite kosher restaurants that had a dairy side and a meat side on Ben Yehuda Street, that was bombed. It was mayhem in Israel during the Second Intifada, and there's no doubt that Israel was the little Satan. We're the big Satan, and even though Al Qaeda was not well known, this at least by us, maybe it was by U.S. intelligence forces, but clearly this hatred for Israel and hatred for the United States was something that really motivated these terrorists. And even though they were part of different groups and so on, they were acting out. And I think we see the same thing today. And you have Sunni versions and Shia versions, but what they have in common is, and they even have slightly different views, of course, on Islam and eschatology, the end times, and so on. Iran has more of a strong eschatology on the end times. However, they hate the same people. and they believed that the methods that they used were justifiable. Now, Tony, I'm not speaking about all Muslims, as you well know. I'm not even saying that Islam teaches these kinds of things, although there's a lot that Islam teaches, particularly regarding Jews, that's very distasteful and terrible. However, I think that it was one movement. I think it continues to be one movement, and we thought that movement, particularly in Afghanistan, was done with, but obviously can't change people that easily, Tony. And
over time, how has your understanding of 9/11's effect on the world and the Middle East changed? Has it undergone more complexity or nuance, and where are you at today?
Yeah, I think two things. One, Americans and particularly Christians had a new understanding of what Israel was going through each and every day during that Intifada and throughout their short life from 1948 on as a result of terrorism. And so I think even though there was a link between America and Israel, and a stronger link maybe between evangelical Christians or various kinds of Christians and Israel, I think that link was humanized. Once the terrorism was on our shores, we began understanding Israel and the Jewish people in Israel more as a people rather than another nation or some kind of end times cosmic piece of a puzzle. And so that really changed, and attitudes towards Israel actually improved. As time went on, some of that did not hold, particularly younger generations, as many recent surveys we've done have shown. But certainly there was greater sympathy for Israel. And I think that we also understood, and as time has gone on, particularly now with the Abraham Accords and some other things that are going on in the Middle East, we've seen that internally among the Islamic countries, that people are choosing sides, not just Sunni and Shia, but when it comes to violent radicalism. And
Abraham Accords, you're talking about what?
Say that again?
What accords were you talking about?
The Abraham Accords.
What are those?
The Abraham Accords are peace treaties signed by the Gulf states and maybe soon some others with Israel that have opened up new commerce and new opportunities for Israel, but particularly with the Gulf states and Morocco as well. And so some people think Saudi Arabia is next. We don't know. But basically, those countries that have been trying to withstand these violent terrorist fringe groups and are banding together and realize they, in some ways, when it comes to security, economy, even politics, identification with the West, etc., they have more in common with Israel than they do with Iran or with Iraq.
So you've got a couple of things going on here. One is the impact on the different religions. It's had an impact on Christians, you say. Can you go a little bit more into what kind of impact 9/11 and the Middle East is now having on, you say it's coming through evangelicals and others, that Jews and Israelis are becoming more human. What does that mean, and what does it mean for the future?
Yeah, sometimes if evangelicalism particularly is centered more in the South and some other regions of the US, certainly there are plenty of evangelicals in the Northeast, but there are more in other places. So more Jews, less evangelicals, less Jews, more evangelicals. That's pretty much the way, and I know this through a lot of random sampling surveys that we've been doing over the last couple of years, that I can demonstrate it analytically. And so I think that a lot of places just didn't know Jewish people. they didn't particularly sympathize with the Jewish people. They read their Bibles sometimes and believed that God would bring the Jewish people back to the land, but it was never something personal. And but when 9/11 happened, people really realized that. You know, Tony, one of the other things that Israel did is they sent rescue and relief teams immediately to Lower Manhattan, and there were quite a few Israelis who were helping out, and I think that really helped shape some of the bonds between the U.S. and Israel. Now, I think the new generation of American evangelicals, for a variety of reasons, are showing less support for Israel, which indicates a growing distance, a growing chasm again. And that might be politically and socially caused. However, the older evangelicals, 50 and above, if that's old for some of us, but 50 and above, those warm feelings towards Israel come out in a lot of surveys that demonstrate that there is this connection. And so that's one of the reasons Chosen People is involved with all of this, because what happens in Israel, where there's almost 7 million Jewish people, is extremely important to us. Number one, we believe it is the Holy Land. People are not that holy right there right now, but it is the land that God set apart for the Jewish people and for others. But I do think that there is a sort of a waning of interest among younger people, but maybe almost an increase of interest in older evangelicals, particularly from regions where there are not many Jewish people. And that really began at 9/11, in my opinion.
Well, in some ways, the younger people don't really know anything much about 9/11. It's a distant, it's history to a lot of kids. So is 9/11 going to have do we need to have it more resonance within younger generations so that they also have this resonance toward Jews in Israel and toward peace in the Middle East? Or what role will 9/11 play in their thinking in the future?
It's interesting that you say that, Tony. It's very important. Our digital media team at Chosen People, at least a half a dozen people, none of them were alive at 9/11. Well, if they were alive, they were babies.
Right.
And so they've been doing all the publicity for the conference that we're having, you know, at Trinity Baptist Church on the 10th and all day on the 11th. And what they decided to do was to write a whole series of essays and do some videos that talk to their generation about why they should be concerned about what happened at 9/11 and how that should be an important point of historical recognition where the United States changed. Not only changed in its relationship to Israel, but changed in its relationship to the Middle East. I mean, what did people really know about the Middle East in America at that point? Not much. So it's not just Israel. I mean, Middle East became a reality in the lives of people, and our young people have grown up with having a sense of the Middle East being an issue. But prior to that, what kind of issue was it? It was just far away and not very tangible. And so we've got a lot of millennials and younger that are trying to make 9/11 a real hook for history so that we can understand why our country is where it is.
Did I see some of those on your Instagram account?
They've
Generation Z and
yeah, it's been on our Instagram account. It's on the Chosen People website and on our Facebook accounts. And
I wonder if we could clip one or two of those testimonies to let people know about your conference and what y'all are thinking.
Sure. Yeah, we can send all that to you to use. And it was very interesting for me because this conference is so personally important to me because of my engagement with it. and because of what I experienced through 9/11 personally. And
now, let me just interject for a moment. You said Trinity Baptist. This is Trinity Baptist in Manhattan, right?
Trinity Baptist on East 61st Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue in Manhattan, Friday
And the
night at 7 and 9 a.m. on Saturday morning until about 4.
How is your understanding of 9/11 different from when it originally happened?
Well, it took time for the shock to wear off, Tony. And so it was very shocking. And now, of course, we have a beautiful new Freedom Center rising out of the ashes in Manhattan. And 9/11, of course, has become more distant, not to the people that lost loved ones. And of course, there's a lot of discussion about there's a new movie out about Ken Feinberg, who ran the Victims Fund. And I started watching it. It's an interesting movie, as is the George Bush, the sort of a day in the life of George Bush. That's also on Netflix. These are really, I'm really glad they've come out with these movies, because I think it will engage younger people to help them understand some of the difficulties that we went through. But today, I think the Middle East is a very important reality. I want to make one point about it, which I think is critical. The real response that most New Yorkers had, most Americans had, and even evangelicals had, was anger and hatred. And I think that that's subsided. It's arisen more because of what happened in Afghanistan.
Let me, Mitch, that's a good place to end it, that the anger has subsided. And you're going to present about some of the vision of the future of what might happen in the Middle East at this conference coming up. And
Yes.
we hope that people will take a look at your website and ours. And thank you very much for being with us today and sharing both personal and wide vision things. I'm Tony Carnes for A Journey Through NYC Religions. Thank you.